committee room, and most of us have masks on, and if you're speaking, you could take it off, and then, so we can hear you more clearly. Obviously, we'd ask you to keep it on to the extent that we can't social distance at any time that you could otherwise. So welcome to the first meeting of the classification of workers in the construction industry task force. Co-chair Senator Caslin and I appreciate your willingness to serve on this task force. Hopefully we can come up with something, a package that we can agree upon and present to the General Assembly in January. We're going to start off with taking the roll, so I'm going to ask Sasha to do that.
Senator Byrd, Senator Carpenter, Representative Branham Clark, here. Representative Santoro,
I am at my home remotely.
Jason Clark,
Here.
Spencer Coates,
I'm here for him, Patrick Coleman.
Billy Dolker, Tommy Gum,
Yes, remotely.
Marty Hammonds,
Yes, I'm here remotely.
Jude Hyman, Patrick Jennings, Ken Lyons,
Here remotely.
Gary Morris,
Here remotely.
Anthony Russell,
Here remotely.
Kevin Sell, Allison Smith, Robert Swisher,
Here remotely. Sorry.
Co-chair Caslin, Co-chair Nemus.
Here in the room. Thank you. And for those who are participating remotely, our committee staff are monitoring the Blue Jeans function program. So if you have something to say or have a question or anything to contribute, just let them know and they'll be monitoring it and we'll call on you then. So I guess since this is the first meeting, wanted to have a kind of an organizational meeting to let everybody know who we all are, what our roles are kind of in this space, if you will. And then to ask any questions, make any points that you think are important for the good of the whole, to ask any questions that we need to answer so we can have, what do we need to be looking at going forward, and then make suggestions to people who might be able to, at the next meeting when Senator Caslin is chairing in September, we can start on, who's going to present information that would help us get to the right result. I did want to state for the record why this issue is important to me, just to let you know kind of where I am as one of the chairs of this committee and the sponsor of the bill last year. So there's effectively 4 reasons why I think this is important. Number one, in a time when we are having difficulty, and these are in no particular order, by the way, maybe the last one's the most important. At a time when the taxpayers, the tax revenues are lower than we want it to be, we don't want to have an unnecessary leaking of the taxes from the bucket, if you will. And so any taxes that should be received by the state need to be received by the state and not diverted by way of cash payments or illegal payments to workers. A second reason is to protect our legitimate Kentucky contractors, of which there are many. I practice law in my private life, and I want to make sure that we're protecting legitimate contractors, because if I have a contracting business that's bidding on a job and you have a contracting business that's bidding on a job and I'm cheating, then you're either going to most likely lose the bid or you're going to have to start cheating, because I'm going to be able to undercut you most times, more times than not. So the second reason to protect our contractors. Another reason is to protect, to make sure that we're not attracting illegal workers, whether they're illegal workers who are American citizens or non-citizens. I think the majority of these that I've seen are non-citizens. We don't want to attract to Kentucky an illegal workforce. And related to that, we want to protect any of the workforce, whether here illegally or not. So if someone gets hurt working on the job, they're going to go to the hospital. EMTALA is going to require us to take care of them, but then otherwise they're effectively going to be dumped onto the system, thereby causing the taxpayers' money They would not have obviously paid into the unemployment. They will not have obviously not paid into the workers' comp and so forth. So the third reason is for the workforce with respect to the illegal labor, if you will. The fourth reason, and I think the most important reason to me, is it's about the Kentucky family. There are men and women across the Commonwealth who are from Kentucky who are ready, willing, and able to work, and they're getting undercut by illegal labor. And I go to some of these sites, and we can talk about them in general. I don't want to call out any contractor in particular, at least not at this stage, unless we have to prove that there is an issue down the line. But when I go to these places, I see illegal labor, people who are not from Kentucky, people who are not from the United States. And then I ask, do we have people from Kentucky able to do these jobs? And the answer, I think, is yes. And so the most important thing to me is I want the Kentucky family person, man and woman, to get these jobs to put food on their table. And so that's the principal reason I think we need to do this. I don't know how prevalent this is. I think it's rather prevalent. But whatever it is, it seems to me that we need to do a better job of handling those issues. And those are the four reasons that I think this kind of thing is important. I think we're going to go around, but obviously we're going to start it. Co-Chair Senator Caslin, and have any comments or questions that we might have. And if you would, Senator Caslin, I know you have significant expertise and experience in this world, in this space. So if you would make sure that everybody kind of knows that if they don't already.
Co-Chair Nemes, I appreciate that introduction. And yes, my background is in the steel business as a steel contractor. And so completely reflect on some of the remarks that, let me take this mask off, reflect on some of those remarks you made there, Representative Nemes. And I'm excited about the group. When you read down the list of the people that are involved here, these are the experts from all across the Commonwealth. And so I'm going to keep my remarks short to give everybody a chance to talk about why this task force is important to them and the value they hope to bring to the table. So maybe we can come up with a good piece of legislation that works for everybody across the Commonwealth. So I appreciate it.
All right, we're going to go through the legislative members in alphabetical order and then also the citizen members after that. Senator Berg.
Good morning, Dr. Senator Karen Berg. Wonderful to be here. Very interesting subject.
Representative Randall Clark.
Good morning, Representative Terry Branham Clark from Boyd County, the 100th District. This has been a prevalent issue for me since I was initially elected in 2018. I represent a community that is steeped in skilled labor, and as Representative Nemes said, I'm encouraged to look at legislation that will promote and advance those individuals. At the same time, I'm a small business owner. I've made payroll. I've paid into the Kentucky Unemployment Insurance Fund. I've paid my Kentucky state taxes on employees. And I just want to look at legislation that makes sure that we hold the same standards across the board for every business that works in the state of Kentucky. Thank you.
Representative Santoro, are you online? I think you're remote.
Yes, I am remotely. Thank you very much. I represent Benton County, which is in northern Kentucky. We're a very growing district where I'm from. Also, I am an electrical contractor for over 30 years. I have my own business. My son is in that business. So just to let you know that we have a desire and need for qualified workers, and we need several workers. We so many times have the problem of general contractors that just want to hire any individual. They don't really know if they are qualified or not. They just want bodies. I think that we could probably get some guidelines. This is very, very much an important process, and I look forward to working with everyone on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Jason Clark, and when we go around with the citizen members, if you could, I think most of us know each other, but to make sure, if you could say the organization that you're with before you start your comments. Jason Clark.
Jason Clark with the Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio Regional Council of Carpenters. I'm the political director for my council, representing 36,000 members between Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
A man who needs no introduction, but I'll call on him anyway, Spencer Coates. It's Patrick Coleman for, Patrick's for Spencer. Patrick?
Yes, sir. For Spencer Coates is a member of the Bowling Green Chamber of Commerce, or I'm sorry, the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. Also works in House and Industries. We also own two contracting companies as well, Scotty's Contracting, Stuart Ritchie.
All right. The next one from Home Builders Association, Billy Doker.
Yes, thank you. My name is Billy Delker. I'm a home builder and developer from the Louisville, Kentucky area. I live in Oldham County. We primarily focus on residential construction, but some light commercial and multifamily, and currently also serving as the president of the Kentucky Home Builders Association this year. So looking forward to being a part of the process.
Thank you, Bill. It's always good to have fellow Oldham Countyans here. I'm from Jefferson to represent Oldham. Tommy Gunn.
Yes, sir. I'm representing AGC and our 600 members. I'm a former president of AGC of Kentucky. I am co-founder and CEO of Alliance Corporation. We're located in Glasgow, Bowling Green, Prestonburg offices. We are a commercial construction company, and I look forward to helping how I can. I think we can accomplish a lot here.
Thank you, Tommy. Marty Hammonds.
Yes, sir, Chairman. Marty Hammonds, Commissioner of the Department of Workforce and Investment. I look forward to working with everyone, much like you stated, Representative Nemes. Definitely want to protect the workforce in Kentucky and help the Kentucky families as much as possible. I look forward to working with all of you.
Jude. Where's Jude? Is she here? Okay. I didn't think I had marked. Okay. Patrick Jennings.
Thank you, Representative Nemes. I'm Patrick Jennings, the managing partner of Commonwealth Alliances, which is a government relations firm, primarily working in Frankfurt, which means that I'm typically much more comfortable sitting in the back of the room than up in the front of the room. And it normally would be and not be a member of the task force. However, with the COVID-19 world, in order to be here with the client, to be in the room needs to be part of it. So I appreciate the chairs allowing me to participate, and look forward to working with everyone in a cooperative way.
Mr. Lyons.
Thank you, Representative Nemes. My name is Ken Lyons. I'm the president of the Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio Regional Council of Carpenters. I work alongside with Jason Clark. Had extensive time in Commonwealth of Kentucky. Kentucky native, was recently located to Indiana. I worked in the field for about 10 years in Kentucky, and this is an issue that I saw firsthand many times, and that I really hope this group can get together, come up with some type of working people of Kentucky in the contract events. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. We're getting a little bit of feedback, so if you could make sure that your microphone is off, not only in the room, but at home, when you're not speaking, that'd be very helpful. Gary Morris.
Co-chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm here representing the Finance and Administration Cabinet, Department of Revenue, and we're excited about the opportunity to participate in the task force. We're aware of some of the issues that are involved, and look forward to providing technical tax expertise to this group as it finishes its work, and we'll be glad to help any way we can.
Thank you, Gary. Anthony Russell.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here on behalf of the Labor Cabinet. Secretary Ross and I have worked together for over 30 years, particularly on issues of this nature, whether it's occupational safety and health or wage and hour. As you're aware, we have a keen interest in the issue and have seen firsthand for years of the statements you made about it being prevalent. I assure you that it is very prevalent, and we see it all the time in our investigations, and we look forward to giving any input and involvement that we can in support of legislation that can help us move this forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. I like that hat. That's, you're pitching the Middletown Beef O'Brady. So that's the one you're trying to get everybody to go to there. But do it before 10 p.m.
Well, that's, the owner there in Middletown and the one here in Frankfurt are best friends of mine. So since I can work remotely, I can advertise.
There you go. That's right. All right. Kevin Sell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin Sell, representing Indiana, Kentucky chapter of Associated Builders and Contractors. I'm not an employee of the association. I'm a member, contractor member. I'm CBO of United Group Services. We're a private industrial construction company with about 350 employees working right now in about 6 states. We're headquartered in Cincinnati. I live up in Campbell County, and we've got an office in Louisville, Brandenburg, and we currently have 200 craft professionals working in the 42 corridor there in Carroll and Gallatin counties. Just to reflect on some of the statements, and I really appreciate, Mr. Chairman, you giving the why, because I think that's extremely important before we do anything, that we all understand the why and we bring that to the table. Despite the workforce shortage curve flattening, which has happened because of COVID, I think all of us that are in construction understand that that workforce shortage is real, and more to the point, to have qualified people doing the work. I would say that, and I agree with Representative Santoro's description as a subcontractor bidding with some generals. I believe that that does exist. I believe it's way more prevalent in public work where the low bid is the factor. I can tell you that in the private sector of industrial, don't see it because the private sector is looking for workforce development, and there are way more pre-qualification steps that you have to go through before you perform any work. Using Ford as an example in Louisville, you're not going to do work at Ford, and we don't do work at Ford. I'm using them as a business example, unless you're qualified to do so. And that's just not safety and health, that's workforce development. And I think that answers possibly a lot of the issues. So I would be exercising some caution to the application of the legislation. And then I also have to ask the question, I know it's construction, I know that that's why I'm here, but there are similar issues in retail, manufacturing, and ag. And I don't know that this group is going to address it all, and maybe this is the start to help other areas address it all. But I think that we ought to be cognizant of that, of where else it can apply in the Commonwealth. And I'm just here to do all I can. I appreciate the appointment. Just making sure that we collaborate, it's effective, and it's practical. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Allison Smith.
Thank you, Representative Nemes. I am Allison Smith. I am with Kentucky Employers Mutual Insurance, or KEMI, as you probably better know it. I'm sorry. KEMI is the largest workers' comp carrier in Kentucky. This issue has been very important to us for a number of years. It impacts 30% of our policies, which is roughly 7,000 policies. So this is a big issue to KEMI. We are excited and honored to be a part of this task force, and we are here to look for a solution that works well for both of our policyholders and our injured workers that come through the system. And so we look forward to what this group can do.
And Bob, I'm not calling you last because you're the least. You're just last on the alphabet. So Robert Swisher.
Thank you, Representative Nemes. My family might argue with you on that, but that's another issue. I appreciate the invitation to be here. I'm the Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Workers' Claims. The mission of the Department of Workers' Claims is to enforce the provisions of KRS Chapter 342, which is the Kentucky Workers' Compensation Act. We're going to ensure that injured workers receive the benefits to which they are entitled. We want to, on a regulatory side, make sure that we enforce the requirement of KRS Chapter 342 for employers to carry workers' compensation insurance. This issue is important to me and to us for lots of different reasons. And one practical example I will give is that when an injured worker works for an uninsured employer, file a claim and they're awarded benefits. Those benefits are paid by the uninsured employers fund. That fund is funded by a tax on workers' compensation premium paid by insured employers. So in essence, the good guys are paying for the bad guys, and that's just inherently unfair. But we want to make sure that we do everything we can to see that workers are appropriately classified so they will qualify for and be awarded benefits should they be injured. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this proceeding.
Thanks to everyone. There's a couple good points that I think were brought up across the board. Some I want to get into off the top, which is, I guess what I'd like to ask is, what kind of questions do we need to have answered? I know when Representative Santoro and Mr. Sell brought up the workforce shortage, which is real in the normal course now, maybe not at this time, but I think that's real. So I'd like to know, how can we identify, because we don't want to hurt, obviously, workforce development. We don't want to hurt economic development. We don't want to hurt contractors. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to make the process fair for everybody. So we need to get into that to see how prevalent it is. And Mr. Swisher, you just mentioned that the good guys pay for the bad guys. How can we figure out the prevalence? Because I think a lot of the pushback is going to be, this is not as big of a deal as it's made out to be, maybe. So is looking at that fund a way that we can determine the prevalence? Of course, you would only get that if there was an injury.
That's correct, and that's one metric, that's one measure, and I can tell you that from the current actuary study, my recollection is that the uninsured employer fund pays out about $7 million a year in benefits to injured workers whose employers did not carry the required workers' compensation insurance coverage. So that's certainly one measure. Also, when we discover through investigation that an employer doesn't carry the appropriate workers' compensation insurance coverage, we issue a citation and a fine. It can be as much as $1,000 per day per employee. The money that is recovered through that process goes into what we call the 920 fund. The 920 fund was created by the legislature, KRS 342-920, and it goes to pay benefits to certain injured workers, a class of injured workers were injured prior to March 1, 1997, whose employers at the time were self-insured, but the security for the self-insurance program has been depleted. So it's important that we keep the 920 fund healthy to be able to pay benefits to folks who are entitled to those benefits, to injured workers. There's the medical benefits and indemnity benefits. So to the extent that folks are gaming the system, if you will, and not obtaining and maintaining appropriate workers' compensation insurance, it's important that we identify those folks and to the extent possible, as appropriate, issue citations, again, to make sure that injured workers are paid the appropriate benefits.
So make sure I understand. I think you get this, Bob, but just bear with me here. So I went to a project, it's a hotel project in Louisville, went to the 14th floor, and we went one floor down. And every floor, we had people that we spoke with that said that they were getting paid cash. They weren't getting paid the way they ought to have been getting paid. And none of them were from Kentucky. In fact, they weren't from the United States. So let's say that one of these people, let's call him Jason because it's my name. Let's say one of these guys are named Jason and he got hurt on the job. What would happen to that hypothetical Jason? Would he be entitled to compensation under the fund? What would happen?
Yes, if you filed a workers' compensation claim and it was adjudicated that Jason was entitled to benefits, that he was in fact an employee and he did in fact have a workplace injury, then the uninsured employers fund, which is administered by the Attorney General's office, would be joined as a party to his claim, and to the extent that benefits are awarded and to the extent that the employer did not pay those benefits because they don't have coverage or they just refuse to pay the benefits, the uninsured employers fund is obligated to pay.
Thanks. Thank you. And who came in, I want to recognize Senator Carpenter, who's here. If you would like to say anything about your background in this area, or we don't have to.
I think most people know. So.
Most people know, that's right. You've been around the block, Senator. That's right.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. In a good way. In a good way. So want to open the floor up. That's what we're trying to do in this organizational meeting. What questions do we need to answer? And who, what information might we be able to obtain to get our work done? Senator Berg?
I just have a quick question. When you find out that you have, in Jason's situation, an employee who's been paid by cash, gets injured, is eligible for compensation, what happens to the employer at that point?
Well, if we're made aware of that, then we will investigate the employer, and to the extent that we determined through investigation that there was a true employer-employee relationship, then we issue a citation and fine that employer. Again, based on a formula that we have, depending on the length of time that the employer was non-compliant with the requirement to have insurance coverage, based on the number of employees, based on the type of risk in the industry that's involved, we'll issue a citation that we do our best to collect.
Senator, I will also add, from our perspective at KIMI, in the situation that you all are describing, and to further what Commissioner Swisher was saying, in that situation, the workers' comp insurance carrier would also have to attempt to recover the premium lost from the employer in that situation. Presumably, they reported to us or their workers' comp carrier that they had independent contractors or no employees at all. So the employer is then also in a situation where they may be facing fines, but they will also be facing an additional premium assessment if possible to collect it.
Mr. Chairman, Kevin Sell. I think we probably have, and this is an assumption on my part, between workers' claims, labor, between wage and hour, and occupational safety and health, they probably have some data that would be worth getting a summary that they probably don't share, but there might be some common threads, meaning my assumption is that a violator in workers' claims is probably a violator in wage and hour and occupational safety and health. And possibly also, by the way we examine public work from the Commonwealth's perspective, in that contracting, do we find contractors there that are awarded work that happen to pop up on the same list as workers' claims? KIMI even could provide data in occupational safety and health. A rather, not a new trend, but something that's been occurring I've been in construction 30 years now, and something that we've seen for the last 20 years is putting more of the burden back on the general contractor, construction manager, or otherwise prime contractor that's controlling the subcontractors. In other words, getting to the head of the snake. We may procure work privately and publicly to a CM, GC, or prime, but there's usually not a look beneath the veil. So in hearing some of the conversations, it's data tie-in, correlation of the data, and possibly looking to make the key people that are getting awarded the contracts responsible.
And when you say we've been putting more responsibility on the contractor, are you talking about the contractor to make sure that the subs are doing the things right that they need to be doing, or are we talking about making them bond what are we talking about?
So no, sir. In the private sector, rarely do you have bonded work, but after the market crash, you used to see a lot of it. We don't do bonded work, for instance. We don't do public work. But what you are seeing, and this is mostly in the private sector, is that there is a huge pre-qualification process. And with that pre-qualification process to get into the door, then you have usually a master agreement or otherwise a project agreement, contract, legal document that says, as the prime GCCM, you are responsible and you are to ensure that everyone working under your contract, and it has a list. Normally they start with occupational safety and health, they start with immigrations, they start with EEO, and it goes down the line to about 10 items. And when you're signing that, and you're dealing with 15, 10, 1 million up to $1 billion contracts that we've seen in Kentucky in the private side, you really have to know, and those that are in the room that do this kind of work, you just don't sign those agreements lightly. You read it, you make sure that everyone in your organization is doing what they need to do.
Thanks. And what comes to mind when you say pre-qualification in the private world and in the public world, that may be some kind of a licensing requirement. Maybe we talk about that.
I would agree, Mr. Chair, because in the public sector, if you did a side-by-side, let's just pick a school job that might be 50 million, and if you look at the way that it's publicly procured and privately procured, this entire group would see a stark difference all the way around the board.
Mr. Chairman, Anthony Russell, if I could comment on my good friend Mr. Sales' remarks, we do see in our occupational safety and health and wage and hour programs significant issues of misclassification. However, we have not really collected data as far as numbers and designation of certain employers that fit within those criteria or been cited under that criteria. The information is really anecdotal, really at this time, but Mr. Sell is correct in that during our inspection process, we see it all the time. We just don't have the metric figures or data to show who it is and how many exist and number of employees. And you're well aware, if we go to a job site to do an inspection, something similar to the example that you gave, where there are illegal workers on the premises, as soon as we walk on the premises, all of a sudden 30 of them they're gone. There's nobody around anymore. So that's some and part of the issue, but so trying to determine how we can accumulate any data as far as numbers, that's something that maybe this group could look and help us try to figure out after 20 years of trying to figure it out and not really being able to do it.
Appreciate that. I will note I went on a project and I went to the trailer, identified myself, and got a proper tour. When I got there, it was bustling. By the time I had a tour, it was lunch break. It wasn't lunchtime, but it was lunch break. Floor still open.
I've got a question or comment, if I may. So as I said, we're primarily in the residential world, so I admittedly am not used to the examples that I'm hearing referred to where, 20 or 30 people disappear. I mean, I think to Mr. Sell's comments, as a general contractor, home builder, an apartment project we're doing right now, I think as a general contractor, we are the ones that are responsible for making sure that our workers are, properly insured and that kind of thing. Now, I can't, as a general contractor, of course, verify that every single person that walks on that job is legal, but I guess that's where maybe my question is. I think this is more prevalent probably in the kind of projects you're mentioning, hotel and those kind of big commercial projects, but I guess where does this issue cross the line with more of an immigration issue? Because I think that's where, I don't know how to wrap my head around that, I guess, because if these guys are getting paid cash on the commercial jobs, it seems like there's another issue before that even happens with whoever that general contractor is that's bringing them here. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but.
It does. And it seems like there's maybe a better mechanism to identify those types of problems in the private world than there is the public. And my understanding, and this is a question I have for the government, not to answer today, but down the line, I've read somewhere that 65% approximately of our construction jobs in Kentucky have some taxpayer funding or tax breaks associated with them. So when we're talking, if we're going to, and I don't know that that's what we're going to do, but if we're going to focus on the package in the end being about publicly funded projects or public projects, how much of the pie would that take up? My reading is about 65%, but I don't know that that's right. So I would ask the government to come back with that maybe next time.
Representative Needhams, I appreciate it, and I was going to kind of wait to the end where I'm going to be chairing the next meeting to talk about a subject matter, but Kevin, you said something in the beginning that kind of perked my ears, because I think you hit the nail on the head. Is this a public issue or is this a private issue? And somebody who only works in the private industry, we go through a lot of areas of background checks. We go through a lot of areas of pre-qualifications and so many things. And we're also working for people who are writing their own checks. It's not coming from the taxpayers. And so I think as a task force, we need to be careful, going back to what you were talking about from an immigration standpoint to a taxpayer standpoint to a capitalism standpoint as an organization, because the last thing we want to do is over-regulate ourselves to where it makes it even harder to find workforce right now. I mean, to find qualified welders in Owensboro, Kentucky, we were the only city in the U.S. who had a lower unemployment rate for the month of July versus last year. It's really, really hard. And so, we have a lot of qualifications at our company, I-9s and all the things to do the proper things to ensure that everybody we hire is a citizen. We do all of our work to make sure that everything we do is paid. And so I think we just, as a group, need to maybe dive into is the abuse on the public side, or are we seeing it on the private side? And I think that's something that maybe for the first subject matter that I'm going to ask maybe the department heads to maybe provide us some information to see, where are we seeing most of our unemployment claim fraud, and where are we seeing the things? Is it coming from projects that are building schools and libraries and highways, or is it coming from something like building a new core steel to a Ford or a Corvette plant in Bowling Green? And because I think you're going to be relatively surprised that it's probably going to be more on the public side, because exactly what you said on a low bid standpoint. So one of the things I'd like to do going forward, we have 4 months of this task force, basically to try to come up with something, and we don't have to produce something, but we're here to try to better the workforce and the environment for our Kentucky workers and our Kentucky businesses. So I'd like to pick 2 subject matters, Co-Chair, if that's agreeable with you, per meeting, and that would give us an opportunity to cover 8 different subject matters. And I'd like for them to come from the individual groups on this task force. Each one of you all were asked to represent us because of your background. So, I'd like to have some feedback on that, please.
Chairman, if I may, I'd like to speak on that. I've personally walked hundreds, if not thousands, of projects, spoke with many folks. We've got a numerous amount of interpreters that work for my council. And I can personally attest to the fact that both private and public, there's a lot of tax fraud taking place, not just in Kentucky, but Indiana and Ohio as well, the folks I represent. And we take great lengths to try to educate folks, especially our legislators, to show them what's taking place out there, because this is it's an underground economy that's taking place right now. A lot of folks don't get to see it. So we try to take folks out there to let them see, and I would encourage everybody that is willing to come out and see what we do. And my organization, we're privately funded. We've got a great apprenticeship training program when you want to talk about certified welders. I don't have the exact dollar amount what we spend in Kentucky. I know that in Ohio we spend over $7 million a year privately without any assistance from the state in education. I think it's roughly around $4 million, don't hold me to that number, in Kentucky. We're very proud of that fact. With our apprenticeship training programs, we're tied in with the career technical centers throughout the Commonwealth. And we want to be part of the solution for people wanting to create careers. And you cannot have a career when you are battling folks that are cheating the system. And that's exactly what's taking place right now. And I would encourage everybody, if you want to go out and see it, I'll be more than happy to take you out there and see it. I've went out and seen it so many times, it's discouraging, very discouraging. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Representative Terry Brown Clark.
Thank you, Representative. I mentioned that I was a small business owner. The small business I own, I'm a properties owner, and I have built residential apartments, remodeled commercial properties. So on the private sector, I've been the property owner that has worked with contractors. And in trying to adhere to best standards, I've questioned general contractors when I've hired them. Do you have employees? Are you using employees, or are you subcontracting? No, these are my employees. Thank you. Then only to find out later on the job, when I started questioning, that they were actually 1099 contractors. They were not employees of the company, at which point I broke the contract with the general contractor. One of my biggest pet peeves is to say a 1099 employee. That doesn't exist. You are an employee or you are a 1099 independent contractor. The IRS has very clear standards and definitions of these two individuals. So for me, coming, onto this task force, it is to start to set the definition clearly in our workforce. Are you an independent contractor or are you an employee? And if you're an employee of a construction company, you should have taxes paid on you, you should have workers' comp, and you should have being paid into the unemployment insurance fund. If that isn't occurring, then it's tax fraud. And there's just no other way around it. That's what it is. The definition of an independent contractor is someone who sets their own hours, provides their own tools, tells when they will be on the job. If we have people who are being told when to come, what they're going to do for the day, when they can take lunch, they're an employee. And we've all walked on construction sites and seen the difference. So we just need to be, very honest and upfront as we start to approach this issue. Now, I do agree, I'm sitting here as a steward of taxpayer dollars. So there is also a line that we draw between public projects and private industry. Whether or not we want to do a deep dive into the private side, I don't think is what we're addressing on this task force. I think we're looking at misclassification in construction industry specific in public projects. As others have mentioned, I have gone on public job sites in the last 2 years that are being funded by taxpayer dollars, and I communicated through an interpreter with gentlemen on a scaffold being paid cash. Bottom line, that's unacceptable. We all know it is, and we need to work on whatever it is we need to do to work together to clarify this issue, because the state of Kentucky is losing millions in revenue on this issue. So I don't think the intent of anyone sitting on this panel is to in any way hurt the contracting industry. I know, like I said, being a properties owner and working very closely with contractors and representing a community of skilled workforce, I want to promote this industry, I want to build it, and I want to see it just grow and bust out at the seams. But I also want it to be equivalent and fair to our Kentucky businesses that are adhering to the standards, that are playing by the rules. It's not okay if we take taxpayer dollars and we award cheaters in this system. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I would note, as a lawyer, I'm not sure the standards are clear, but they're at least there, and I think Kimi would agree there. But Representative Clark, to your point, to further it, I know President Stivers and Speaker Osborne have asked us to look at the misclassification, and that's a significant thing, no doubt. But a bigger problem I have is the example you gave and one I gave. It's really, the question is who pays the taxes on that, whether it's the employer or the employee contractor. But the example we're giving is nobody's paying them because the person's getting cash and they're not paying taxes. If we have proper reporting at both levels, we can argue over whether or not that identification, that classification was appropriate. But I think the bigger problem, it seems to me, is there is no classification. There's a, show up at, tonight and I'm gonna give you some cash. That person getting the cash, they claim is an independent contractor, but he's not reporting. And so I think it's a bigger problem than just misclassification. I think it's just flat out not, wink, wink, nod, nod fraud. I don't know how prevalent that is, but let's come back if we could, real quickly, but let's come back if we could after your comments to Senator Castle's question, and that is, what issues do we need to dive into?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I completely agree with Representative Clark, and to your point, Representative, and also to Mr. Clark down in the front row. There are segments of the private sector that have issues. You just heard them. It's mostly outside of the industrial scope. I would challenge anyone to try to find that on a Ford or a Nucor plant. But there are aspects of that. So I'm not saying that the private sector is lily white. If you go out and see a hotel being built, you're going to see, I've seen it. I was with a general contractor before where I'm at now as a prime. But also there's the 1099 standpoint, which that doesn't pass any type of IRS or Kentucky Revenue Cabinet litmus test. It's illegal from the get-go. And I was glad Representative Clark gave her experience, because that's another side of it with private business owners trying to do the right thing and still having people come underneath. But certainly, that's just wanted to back up what they were saying, and certainly look forward to talking about what Senator Castle wants to do.
I have one other question just on the 1099s that I'd like to look at. During this pandemic that we're in, COVID-19, I think, has shown a spotlight when we had to waive the eligibility requirements to be able to provide assistance to independent contractors in the state, which again, one of the other businesses I owned was a hair salon. I just owned the property. They were independent contractors. So I'm not, I'm aware of that. There are legitimate 1099 workers in this country that are independent contractors. I just have a problem with people who classify employees as 1099 to avoid their tax liabilities. But I think I would like to hear the figures, if anyone listening can provide that or knows. During this pandemic, how many independent contractor claims did we fulfill? Because we all know there was not a payment into unemployment insurance fund. And is there a way to track through that claim process our legitimate independent contractors versus claims that we needed to pay because employers did not properly classify their employees? Because at the end of this pandemic, we're going to pick up the bill for that.
Well, to be fair, employers are going to pick up the bill for that, because they're the ones that are going to have to replenish that unemployment insurance fund, and that is not, I don't know who said the good paying for the bad.
Yes.
That's not fair, but it's coming, and employers know that, and one of the things that the senators and representatives on this up here are going to have to grapple with is the fairness of that, and it seems to me that could be mighty unfair. We got to figure that out. Patrick Jennings has been trying to get in, so I'm going to call on him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and representing the Carpenters, I would just say to the chairs in terms of sort of goals. There was a lot of time spent this past session, really starting back in November of last year. We sat down with representatives from contractor community with ABC and AGC and home builders, and I think at that time agreed that there is an issue that warrants a conversation here to try to fix. I remember during probably February, as we were trying to work on a legislative solution, someone said, Patrick, part of your problem is you're trying to kill a bee with a sledgehammer here. And to be honest with you, I think that was true. And so I think one of the things as we go through this that we're really, from Carpenter side, trying to get to is, if we agree that there's a problem and that it needs a solution, is tell us what is the appropriate solution. We don't want to step on toes or impede economic development or business. But yet it does sound like everyone agrees that there is an issue here to be addressed. One of the questions I had, and it's more of a curiosity, one of the things we heard during the legislative session a number of times, and really as we were trying to develop a legislative solution, was frequently a sticking point in that solution. And I guess it's a question to Mr. Sell, is one of the things that we kept hearing was you need to leave the prime contractor out of the conversation, because oftentimes the prime contractor may not know that if the prime contractor has subbed out interior work to a subcontractor, oftentimes it could be the subcontractor who is hiring folks and classifying them inappropriately or those things. And the prime may not even know that it's happening. And so you need to be careful pulling the prime into it. I think one of our solutions exempted the prime as we were thinking through that. And listening to Mr. Sell, I guess my question were we on the right track with that? Because it sounds like maybe the prime is more involved in this. And so I just throw that out as, I know that's a little bit more of a in the weeds question, but I appreciate again the chance to get in and try to figure out the right solution and take everyone's input.
Mr. Chair, I can answer that question. I think the prime, in most cases, is a part of that problem because it's, there are some that will hide behind the prime because they know if they go in as a prime, they may not be subject to other requirements. But again, as an industrial prime that predominantly does mechanical industrial, in other words, pipe, steel, of the such, pipe pumps, valves, skids, fabrication, we self-perform 85%, but that being said, that's 85% of $100 million a year. That's 15%. That's $15 million a year that's getting subcontracted. So what I will tell you is sometimes we need a civil to do certain things. We need an electrical to do instrumentation. So we are hiring them. They are under a contract with us, but that it's got an upstream liability to the end user.
And on that question, the overall broad question, who should be responsible is what I wrote down. When I talk to, and I won't make either side say this, I'm going to say it, and it's based off of conversations I've had with some of my own clients, but others in the contracting world, there's an issue of trust. Trust between, let me just say it, me as a lawyer. There's an issue of trust between myself as a lawyer representing my clients and the government. It's a recognition that there are some people that engage in misconduct, but not everybody who gets investigated or not everybody who gets the target put on them is engaging in misconduct. And when somebody gets tagged or investigated, that costs them a lot of money because they've got to pay legal fees. And it costs them a lot of time that they're in the net, so to speak. So one of the reasons that we decided to exempt out primes is because of that kind of concept. So we need to figure out who should be responsible, and as importantly as anything, I think, because we're all in it for economic development. I talk to my friends, the carpenters, and that's something that they remind me all the time. And I think, and I take them at their word, and I believe that. And so we need to make sure that whatever we do doesn't stifle the legitimate contractors who are trying to get it right. And so maybe provide, and I'm just spitballing here, but maybe if some kind, and I'm not married to licensing, and to tell you the truth, I'm not a huge licensing guy, but maybe providing the prime or the contractor some kind of if you check these boxes and you're in the clear kind of thing, might be the way we go, because I don't only want to solve the problem of paying workers illegally. I'd like to also give a path to smooth sailing, if you will, for contractors that are doing it right, which I think is a lot of what I hear from contractors is, we know there's a problem, but man, I don't trust the government to come in and they're going to cause me all kinds of issues and all kinds of costs, and I'm doing it right. And so anyway, so that's also, I think, in the mix that maybe people wouldn't say as forthrightly as maybe I've said too much there, but any other issues we should cover? Who's responsible, public versus private?
Chairman, if I may, Mr. Sell is correct that in the manufacturing industry, there's very little, from what I've witnessed, misclassification taking place, tax fraud taking place. I'm a millwright by trade. So I'm very proud of the work that I've done. I worked in every sector of the industry, from Honda facilities to working on turbine units, creating the electricity that we use each and every day. But this is more centrally located in hotels, even on bridges, where money is being spent, taxpayer dollars. I do feel with the projects that I've seen that I think it's a travesty to the taxpayers of the Commonwealth that their tax dollars are being spent on projects where tax fraud has taken place. I've seen it in every sector. In manufacturing, it is, for whatever reason, excluded to a big part. I have started seeing it grow in the manufacturing sector, though. I have witnessed that. I just wanted to make that comment, but I do agree with Mr. Sell's assessment that manufacturing is somewhat excluded from tax fraud. Thank you, Chairman.
The only additional point that I would like to make from our perspective, and this echoes what Representative Clark was saying earlier, in the current misclassification system, there is a lot of uncertainty in how workers will be classified, whether that they are an independent contractor or they are an employee. That is the primary issue that we face in dealing with this, and that we see on a day-to-day basis. Our team spends between 30 and 65% of its time just helping to make that decision and working with our policyholders and working with our agents to determine whether someone that is an independent contractor or is an employee. And so as we are looking at this, I'm hopeful that perhaps we can, as part of our group, reconsider how we classify these workers and see if we can provide some certainty or at least a little bit more uniformity and consistency to the definition of an employee versus an independent contractor.
Sounds like a pretty good topic to cover. Senator Caslin is what she said, how does Kentucky do it? What's the negatives? Who does it better?
I would add to that, because I think, again, and you just kind of alluded to this, again, most of my expertise is in the residential, light commercial world, and I think there are people that work on my job sites every day that own their own business, but we tell them, hey, you're going to build this deck at this house and what have you, and I think that's a legitimate 1099, kind of a scenario, and so I think sometimes there could be a gray area there on that classification issue. I think one of the other subject matters maybe we should look at, and I don't know the answer to this, is, what does our current law say? And, what are the current statutes that are in place that already govern this? Because I think what you were just talking about, Representative, is something that, kind of scares me on behalf of myself, but also the 5,000 members of the Kentucky Home Builders. I'm not saying that we don't have any violators. I think that would be a misstatement to say that, but I do believe the majority are doing it right. I think the majority in the residential, light commercial world are doing it correctly. And so, to have a fear of an over-regulation or over, burdensome to the general contractors, however you want to classify that term, would just be something of concern to me. So to understand what we currently have in place and what, obviously the task force is about improving this scenario and making sure this fraud doesn't continue, or however you want to term it. But that would be a subject matter I think would be good as well.
We're not going to go too much longer, but and anybody that has any ideas offline can obviously feel free to communicate with Senator Caslin or myself or anybody else that will get the information to us. But I want to ask a lot of comments from this room. I want to ask the government, the executive branch officials, if they have any, don't have to, but if you have any comments or suggestions that moving forward, if you guys know of any particular data that maybe we're not aware of that would be very beneficial.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Sure, just identify yourself, because the only one we can see is Mr. Swisher, which you're doing a good job of keeping a straight, your poker face, Mr. Swisher, but if you were going to do anything untoward, we were going to see it.
Sorry, my apologies. This is Ken Lunds with LRC. There have been two border states pass legislation, in Virginia and Tennessee, and I think it would probably a good idea if we could get copies of those to all of the committee members between now and the next meeting, just to kind of get an idea of what some other states are doing. I know Kentucky's unique in its own, but there are probably a lot of things in there that keep them having to reinvent the wheel that are possibly working. So if the chair would please, I would be willing to get those to Patrick and or to somebody on the LRC and try to get those out to everybody. Thank you.
It's a good idea. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to echo some of the comments that I've heard about standards for determining when an individual is truly an independent contractor as opposed to an employee. And as you know, workers' compensation, we have a common law 9-part test that's been around for decades. It's been refined fairly recently or more recently to 4 major factors. But the test we use, the factors we consider may be different than what wage and hours consider, may be different than what revenue considers. It seems to me that if someone's an employee They should be an employee across the board and for all purposes, and not just for workers' comp, for revenue, for wage and hour, or anything else, because that can lead to inconsistent results. I think the idea of having a uniform set standards is commendable, admirable, and something that we should strive for. That way, it's a relatively bright line, and everybody knows out front and in public what the standards are. So right now, it's all done behind the scenes, and nobody really knows unless they happen to be involved in one of these claims. So I think looking at developing a set of factors or a test to make that determination is really important.
Uh, just kind of listening as well and trying to just jot some ideas down for our next meeting. And then listening in general, I think we can all around here say that a lot of this abuse probably becomes from a shortage of workforce. You know, I mean, Jason, you could probably look back over the last 20 years and see the membership of the people signing up to be a carpenter or to be a masonry or a welder or anything probably declining. I think we've all seen that. And so I think it's an area as well that we need to consider. You know, when you talk about classifications of workers, you know, we have to have those workers fill these positions to be able to classify them. And I think from our apprenticeship programs to our vocational schools, all those kind of things, if we want to see Kentuckians filling Kentuckian jobs, then we need to be raising up a generation of Kentucky workers. And so I think that's something that at the end of this task force, we're going to see is probably the underlying issue of all of this is a shortage of workforce. But for the next meeting, I'm going to work with staff. If anybody has any, particular subject matters that they want to talk about or dive into, you can shoot us an email and we can kind of get those. Senator Carpenter, you want to say something?
Well, just real quickly, I'm sorry for coming in late, but I went to the job site to get my guys ready this morning. I'll tell a quick background since I realize some of the folks aren't former members or current members, but I'm in this construction business. I build houses, have a bunch of apartments, or what I can call a bunch of apartments, about 150 that we manage internally ourselves, and I build them all and build houses and light commercial, so I'm similar to what Billy does. And my question or my comment was going to be exactly what Senator Cashland said is, all these things are great and wonderful, but if you don't have people on the job site to get the project done, then the project doesn't happen. And so you got to make sure that we're making sure that the workforce is there, because we try to make sure that all my folks are right. But let's be realistic. Everybody who shows up to does your roofing, does all your drywall work, does your concrete work, lays your brick. I mean, a lot of these folks, outside of electricians, plumbers, your true licensed skilled laborers. And all those folks are skilled laborers, but I'm talking about licensed folks. A lot of these people, you hire a general that does your sub work for you, and then he brings folks in. So making sure that we have people that can provide the services and provide the work is going to be a big part of making sure all this works out, because it all sounds warm and fuzzy to say, oh yeah, everybody's got to be this, this, and this, but the reality of it is these projects don't happen if you don't have some of these folks that are in there working, because there's nobody else showing up. Today, it's not too bad. It felt pretty good this morning, but last week when it's 95 and 100% humidity, I try to get some people to show up to work, and they're always sick, it seems like. So Senator Cashland's comments are exactly on point, I think, of what we need to make sure we're focusing on to make sure we do the right things going forward.
Yeah, I think those are really important contributions, and that's why I wanted you to give your background. I knew that you're in the industry. I would push back just a bit for conversation purposes and say, I wonder how much is the chicken and how much is the egg there. It seems, and I'm talking about skilled trades here, not more than anything. If I'm going into the skilled trade and there are no jobs, I'm looking elsewhere because they might be going to illegal workforce. But if that illegal workforce isn't getting those jobs, then I think there's more demand, so then there will be more supply. So right now, obviously, I get it. I mean, you got to get the job done. But at some point, we need to recognize that getting the job done, and I don't think all of it is like that. I think some of it's just an effort to get it done on the cheap. Not for you, obviously, but at the broader level. But so my problem is, I said chicken and the egg. You can say horse in the cart, whatever, buggy. But I think some of the misconduct drives the problem with some of our workforce. Maybe.
And I would disagree with that totally, but anymore, the cheap is what people foresee. If they see somebody there doing the work, they think they're cheap. They're not. You're just glad to have, you're just wanting somebody there to get the job done. A lot of times in the world we're in now, and once again, in my background, you know, my framing folks, the people I buy my lumber from, call me and tell me on a $30,000 house package right now, that with all this going on, that you can look at your package going up $3,000 to $5,000. So, you know, you're looking at almost a 20% increase. You're not going to stop. You're going to have to figure out how to make all that stuff work. And so the employees are the same deal. A lot of times you're not calling people and bargaining with them, trying to get them bargain price. You just want them to show up to get the project done. And so, but you're exactly right. My son's been on my construction projects. He's 15. And I'm wanting him to understand what all's involved, because we have to do what Matt's talking about, make sure we've got generational people that's coming up to fill these opportunities. Because if you don't think the construction industry and all this is a big part of the economy, if any of you all have not been in Lowe's during this pandemic, you'll find out real quick. In Madison County, and I've been in probably 5 counties trying to buy product because you can't find product right now. Go buy a refrigerator, try to find one. You're traveling all over to find this product. Lowe's are booming. They're meeting their entire year budgets in the first quarter of this year. And so if you don't think that these things are happening in the construction industry is a big part of our economy, I think people are finding that out now with all this going on, because it's really brought light to it.
And Jason's always come at it from a different angle from an attorney. You put an ad in the newspaper right now in Louisville, Kentucky, with the highest unemployment rate we've seen in years for an individual to pour concrete, and you let me know how many applications you receive back. You know, the truth is out there, that the workforce shortage is there, and the willingness for people to do it. I know the wages are there. You know, I mean, the trades industry right now is some of the fastest growing high wages that there is, and I can tell you personally, as a company, we've seen wages grow 20% in the last 3 years from supply and demand, simply of retaining people.
And I want to give a plug to Crestwood Hardware. You should go there as well. It's a locally owned business, not just Lowe's. I think Kenneth Lyons had, hold on, Jason. I think Kenneth Lyons has a comment. He's been in line, or have you already made your comment? Wait for him to hit unmute.
Oh, my apologies. You said exactly what I was going to say a while ago, the comment I was going to make.
All right, Jason.
Chairman, if I may, a lot of the statements that are made, it is correct. I do feel that we have a workforce shortage that's going on. We've witnessed that within my own organization, but there's a misconception, and I believe it starts off with the schools, where these children from their parents are told that the construction industry is a dead end because of what's taken place with tax fraud, cash under the table. I feel that that's a huge problem. That is the underlining issue. I've often, you know, even being a leader within my organization, I think about my 2 boys. You know, do I want them to go into construction with what I've witnessed? Is there a future there? You know, with what they would have to compete against. And it starts off in the high schools. It starts off with these counselors. I had counselors telling me, I remember in high school, you know, I'm 48, will be 48 years old in November, that told me that if you don't go to college, you don't get a college degree, you're never going to be anything in life. And that there's some truth to that, but there's also another side to the coin there. You know, there's the construction industry that there is no ceiling. Any child that chooses to go into construction, and we should encourage those who have the ability to freely approach that career, because there is no ceiling, and we shouldn't allow what's taken place to the Kentucky taxpayer and what I've witnessed, what's going on. I mean, it's going on all throughout the Commonwealth, I'm telling you. We've had legislators out to job sites. They can talk about it themselves. I won't speak for them. It's unprecedented about the amount of money that's being lost here in Kentucky. And we can't expect these children starting off in these high schools to want to have a career if we don't address what's happening right now. And I'm not disagreeing, there's a workforce shortage, but there's a reason behind that as well. And that's what we gotta look at. Where's it starting at? It's starting off in the schools, in my opinion. You know, I've witnessed it firsthand, I've dealt with it, I've lived it. You know, I like to think that, I don't wanna say I'm an expert, you know, I don't have a PhD or anything like that, but, I'm very heartfelt in what I've seen. Thank you, Chairman.
I would just add one comment to that and maybe a slightly different angle. I believe it starts in the home as opposed to the school, and I think it's a cultural issue. I think it's become an issue for us as parents that, look, I've got a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and you know what? I mean, I'm not saying I want my daughter to be out there framing houses, but there's a lot of other aspects of the construction business that she could be a part of. And it doesn't take a college degree to be successful at it, you know? I mean, I've got a lot of commercial property. I've got a dentist in one of my buildings that has $450,000 worth of school loan debt, you know? She'll be paying on that for 20 years or whatever, you know? So I think it's a cultural issue that starts in the home, and then I think it carries into the schools. But second to that too, and maybe I'm getting off track here, but I think we're focused, obviously this is focused on the construction industry, but I think this tax fraud we're talking about is a way bigger issue than just construction. I think it's happening in the horse industry, the restaurants. I mean, there's a lot of other areas that I think as a state and as citizens of the Commonwealth that I hope that is being looked at in addition to putting all the focus just on construction. Because while I don't disagree that it's happening in the Commonwealth, I think the large majority is doing it right. I think the large majority is doing it well. It is happening, and I think it needs to be fixed. But I don't think it's not the majority. There's a lot of other fraud, I believe, that's going on in a lot of other industries. And so obviously I'm passionate about construction. I've been around it my whole life, and I did go to college, but I worked my way through college by working in construction. That's how I paid my way through. And so I think it's something that I've been around for 30 years now, but I think there's a lot of other industries that I hope we're focusing on as well.
We're going to open the floor especially for the government, if they want, or anybody online, if they want to make a comment, just butt in. The reason that I have focused on the construction industry is twofold. One, it was brought to me, but most importantly, in those other industries, I don't quibble at all that there's issues. The taxpayer dollar isn't nearly as prevalent as it is in construction. And so that's the reason that my eyes are on construction. If we want to broaden, we'll have that conversation, but when my reading is that 65% of the construction projects are taxpayer funded in some way, it seems incumbent upon me to at least see if this is an issue. I think it is. So that's the reason, for me anyway. I know a lot of people on this group, and I don't know if you were leaning your head to speak. No, okay. I know a lot of people on this group, most people on this group. You brought up, Billy, that you're a Kentucky father of Kentucky kids. Every one of us on here we care about what's best for Kentucky. I don't know anybody on here that's not a person of good faith that wants to improve the economic environment in Kentucky, and that solves so many of our problems. And that's been a focus, I know, of mine and of the legislature, at least since I've been here for 4 years, is to improve the business environment, and then you can improve our society by getting more tax dollars and so forth and so on. And that's why we're fighting so hard for that. Every single person in here agrees with that. There is tension in this issue. There's no doubt about it. There's tension from the right and the left, from the top to whatever. But I think people of good faith can look at this issue. I don't know anybody with better faith than my co-chair over here. We came in together. I think we can look at this issue, people of good faith, and maybe not get everything that you want or I want or whatever, but that can move us forward, take a step in the right direction. And that's, I think, the challenge that's been put upon us by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. So with that, if there's no comments, we're going to break. Any issues that you come up with afterward, once you go back to your respective organizations, Senator Caslin has the next meeting, and you can get those issues to us, and we'll move forward, and we're going to improve this situation, maybe just a little bit, but we're going to improve it. That's what my goal is. Thanks, everybody.
When's the next meeting?
Do we know when the next meeting is? Okay.
Next meeting's in September, date not been chosen yet. Thank you.
I'm in Crestwood Hardware often. Okay, I said, where's Crestwood Harbor, Austin?